Imagine this. You're walking through a neighborhood just like any other. Brick houses lined in symmetry, trimmed hedges, driveways with sedans that all look vaguely alike. Children laugh in the distance. The sky is politely blue. The air smells like comfort, routine, predictability, and modest dreams. You wave to a neighbor. They smile and wave back. Nothing is wrong. Everything is normal. But something in you twitches, not in your body, deeper. A subtle nausea in the soul, like hearing a familiar song played in a slightly wrong key. You can't name it, but something feels artificial. As if this life, this normalcy, is too neatly packaged. Like a box sealed shut before you ever had the chance to see what's inside. You push it away. Everyone else seems fine. They've got jobs, families, vacations once a year, weekend dinners and polite jokes about taxes. They scroll, they sleep, they wake up and do it again. No one's screaming in the streets. So surely this is what life is supposed to be, isn't it? But here's the question that quietly haunts you. What if this normal life is not real? Not natural, but a cage cleverly disguised as freedom? What if the very thing you've been striving for, stability, acceptance, normalcy, is the very thing that's killing your spirit? Not dramatically, not with flames or tragedy, but slowly, neatly, like a dream that becomes so routine. You forget you're even asleep. You were born wild, full of wonder, asking why the stars glow and where the wind goes. You were born with questions so big they terrified the adults. You danced without rhythm, created without purpose, laughed without permission. You were uncontained, free, and then you learned to color inside the lines. Be realistic. Don't ask too many questions. Just be normal. So you tried. You really tried. You got the grades, the job, the lease, the likes, the insurance. You did what you were told, what was modeled, what was expected. And yet, here you are, haunted by the quiet suspicion that something has gone terribly wrong. Why does happiness feel so choreographed? Why do most people seem half asleep, going through the motions? Why does being normal require so much suppression of who you truly are? We rarely say it out loud, but the script is written in all our lives. Go to school, pick a career, buy a house, find someone to love, settle down, don't rock the boat, fit in. And if you follow that formula, not too fast, not too slow, you'll be rewarded with the comforting label, normal. But what if that reward is hollow? What if normal is not sanity, but sedation, not peace, but programming? Carl Jung once warned, the greatest tragedy of the family is the unlived lives of the parents. But what if that tragedy is spreading, a generational sleepwalk, where one by one, people trade aliveness for acceptance, wonder for structure, and truth for what's trending? Could it be that normal is not a destination, but a mask one, that hides the raw, messy, powerful truth of who we really are? Look around, how many people are thriving in this so-called normal? How many wake up with purpose, alight with meaning, unshackled by fear? And how many are just ... surviving? Behind closed doors, the cracks reveal themselves, the quiet despair, the prescribed pills, the alcohol hidden in kitchen drawers, the secret longing for something more, even if we can't name it. We chase the next thing, the next job, next gadget, next self-help trend, hoping that maybe, this time, we'll feel whole. But deep down, there's a whisper. Something about this is wrong, and we're afraid to listen. Because If that whisper is telling the truth, then everything we've built our lives on might collapse. But what if collapse is not the end, but the beginning? What if the illusion of a normal life must crumble before you can awaken to a life that's truly yours? What if the cage has been invisible all along, built from your thoughts, your fears, your inherited definitions of success, and the key has always been in your hand? The truth is unsettling, but that's the cost of waking up. So we must ask, not casually, but with everything at stake, what is this normal we cling to? Who defined it? Why do we obey it? And what if letting it go is the only way to truly live? Let's step into the shadows behind this illusion. Let's examine the hidden architecture, psychological, philosophical, and societal, that holds it together. Because only when we see the cage for what it is, can we begin to break free. There's a peculiar pain that arises not from what's broken, but from what appears fine. A kind of silent suffering that hides behind smiles, small talk, and to-do lists. That's the suffering of the normal life, the kind no one talks about because it isn't dramatic enough to warrant sympathy, but it's chronic enough to drain the soul. So what is this hidden problem? It begins with a simple lie, repeated so often that we mistake it for truth, that a good life is one that looks stable on the outside, regardless of what it feels like on the inside. This is the root of the illusion. From childhood, we are not taught how to be authentic, but how to be acceptable. We learn how to avoid being too loud, too curious, too emotional, too intense. We're subtly trained to become palatable, to smooth out our edges, to lower our voice, to obey the rhythm of a society that values sameness over soul. The philosophers warned us. Erich Fromm called it the marketing personality, a self that is constantly shaped to meet the demands of the social marketplace. Not what is true, but what is sellable. We become brands, not beings. Carl Jung wrote of the persona, the social mask we wear to survive in the world. But if we identify too strongly with this mask, he warned, we lose touch with the self, the raw, uncensored essence of who we are. And perhaps most hauntingly, Nietzsche said, in individuals, insanity is rare, but in groups, parties, nations, and epochs, it is the rule. What if our culture's version of normal is not health, but collective dysfunction? Let's look closer. We live in a system where people are trained to chase productivity over presence, where you're rewarded not for being, but for producing, for how fast you can respond to emails, how many tasks you can complete, how little rest you can survive on. We call this efficiency. But what if it's spiritual malnourishment in disguise? We are told to follow the rules, but rarely encouraged to question who wrote them. You go to school, but not to explore truth. To pass tests, you work, but not to create meaning. To make money, you relate, but often not from vulnerability, from performance. In this version of life, everything becomes a role. Student, employee, partner, parent. Each comes with a script. And as long as you perform it well, you're rewarded with approval, with promotions, with the sacred badge of being normal. But what if your soul was never meant for roles? What if your essence doesn't fit neatly into a box, and never will? This dissonance between the inner truth and the outer performance is the hidden wound, and it festers in silence, because everyone else is playing along. You don't want to be the one who complains about a life others would kill for. You have food, shelter, a job, maybe even a family, and yet you feel empty, and you feel guilty for feeling empty. So you numb that through distraction, overwork, endless scrolling, overconsumption. You chase novelty to compensate for lack of meaning. You chase connection but fear being seen. But the real pain isn't in what you lack, it's in what you suppress. All the parts of you that had to be exiled in order to appear normal. The artist who stayed in accounting. The mystic who mocked their own intuitions. The child who stopped dancing because someone laughed. The dreamer who chose practicality over passion. The rebel who became polite. This is how the illusion sustains itself, by teaching you to trade your truth for safety, your wildness for control, your soul for the illusion of belonging. And the most tragic part, it almost works. You won't die. You won't collapse. You'll function. You'll smile. You'll convince yourself you're happy because you're supposed to be, because this is normal, because this is what everyone wants, right? But late at night, when the house is quiet and the notifications stop, you'll hear it, that ancient voice from the depths of your being. This is not who you are. And for a moment, the mask will crack, the illusion will flicker, and you'll remember that there's something more. This is not madness. This is your soul trying to wake you up. Because here's the deeper truth. You were not made to fit into the world. You were made to shape it from the inside out. And the structures you now obey, school systems, job hierarchies, cultural ideals of success and family, were not handed down from the heavens. They were invented by humans for control, for predictability, for order. But life, real life, is not orderly. It's not linear. It's not normal. It's messy, wild, transcendent, and it refuses to be tamed. You feel dead inside, not because something is wrong with you, but because something is wrong with the world we were told to adapt to. The problem is not your inability to cope. It's the absurdity of what you're trying to cope with. So maybe the real madness is not in questioning normal life, but in accepting it without question. The moment the illusion begins to crack isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's as simple as a question whispered in the back of your mind. Is this it? You're sitting at your desk, or washing dishes, or staring at a glowing screen full of lives that seem fuller than yours. And suddenly, you feel it, the dissonance, the weight of everything you've been pretending to want. That's how the awakening begins. Not with fireworks, but with discomfort. It starts when the things that used to satisfy no longer do. When promotions feel hollow, when small talk feels unbearable, when weekends blur into Mondays, and even your moments of freedom feel scripted. This is your soul protesting its own imprisonment. You start to notice the absurdity of things. How people talk about living their best life while sleepwalking through routines. How joy is marketed in packages, minus 7-day vacations, new gadgets, trendy diets, but rarely found in the fabric of daily life. How everyone's fine, but no one's alive. And then comes the guilt, because part of you still wants to belong, still wants to be seen as successful, stable, normal. You've built a life that makes sense, but now it no longer feels right. You begin to feel like a stranger in your own life, a character playing a role you no longer believe in. This is a sacred rupture, and though it's terrifying, it's also the beginning of truth. The philosopher Jiddu Krishnamurti once said, "It is no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. You are not broken for questioning. You are waking up. But awakening is not glamorous. It doesn't come with clarity or certainty. It comes with unlearning. First, the loss. You grieve the life you've outgrown, not because it was fulfilling, but because it was familiar. You grieve the identity that made sense to others, the job title, the roles, the personality you carefully crafted to be acceptable. This grief is real, because even illusions, when held long enough, become part of us. Then comes confusion. What? Now, who are you when you're no longer performing? What do you believe in when all the scripts dissolve? There are no easy answers here, because the path ahead isn't mapped. It must be discovered. You begin to notice how tightly the illusion is woven into daily life, in the way people rush through conversations without ever listening, in the way vulnerability is seen as weakness, in how success means being constantly busy and failure means rest, in how fear of judgment keeps us from speaking our truths, even to ourselves. And suddenly, you see it all more clearly. You were trained to chase security, not meaning, to seek approval, not authenticity, to survive, not to live. This is where the call to question arises, not to rebel for the sake of rebellion, but to remember that the world you see is not the only one possible, that reality is shaped by collective agreement, and you're allowed to disagree. You begin to ask, what if success isn't accumulation, but alignment? What if freedom isn't found in options, but in honesty? What if happiness isn't the goal, but a byproduct of living truthfully? What if your discomfort is not a problem to fix, but a signal to follow? These questions don't lead to immediate answers. They lead to depth, to silence, to sacred discomfort. And slowly a shift begins. You stop trying to impress and start trying to express. You notice which conversations give you life and which drain you. You realize you don't need everyone to understand you, just a few who see you. You start spending more time with your inner world, even if it's uncomfortable, because for the first time, you're not trying to escape yourself. You're listening, and in that listening, something ancient awakens, something that was buried beneath expectations, beneath survival strategies, beneath the pressure to be normal. Yourself, not the version shaped by fear and reward, but the one that existed before conditioning, the one that feels alive, not from achieving, but from being, the one that craves beauty, depth, truth, not out of luxury, but necessity. This awakening changes how you move through the world. You may still go to your job, still pay your bills, still engage in the structures you once questioned. But now, something is different. You're no longer asleep within them. You're awake despite them. You start to bring soul into the system. You infuse routine with presence. You turn conversations into connection. You find ways to create, to feel, to play again, not as rebellion, but as remembrance. But this path is not easy. You will be misunderstood. People will think you've changed, and you have. Not into someone new, but someone real, and the world doesn't always reward realness. It's too raw, too wild, too unpredictable, but you'll know, deep down, that you're no longer living a lie, and in time you'll begin to meet others on this path. Fellow questioners, edgewalkers, soul seekers, people who don't fit the mold and never wanted to. Together, you'll create new definitions of normal, ones rooted in presence, not performance, in connection, not conformity, in aliveness, not approval. Because maybe the point was never to be normal. Maybe the point was to wake up from it. There comes a moment, quiet and almost imperceptible, when you realize that the war you've been fighting wasn't against the world, it was against your own illusions. Not just any illusions, but the most seductive one of all, that a normal life exists, and that you were supposed to be living it. This realization doesn't arrive with trumpets or grand proclamations. It slips in like dawn soft, slow but unstoppable. You start to see it in the quiet rebellion of a thought that says, what if I never needed to be normal in the first place? You begin to notice how everything you chased was never about you. The job, the apartment, the wedding photos, the curated smiles, they were puzzle pieces to a life someone else drew for you. A template passed down like a genetic code, inherited from centuries of people trying to survive, trying to fit in, trying to make sense of chaos through repetition. But a template, no matter how polished, can never contain your essence, because you are not a copy. You are not meant to replicate someone else's success, someone else's family model, someone else's expression of meaning that you are meant to create. And here lies the final truth. A normal life is not a destination. It's a prison made of comparisons. And the key to escape is not change, it is awakening. Awakening to the possibility that your pain was not proof of failure, but proof that you were alive in a world that asked you to be numb. Awakening to the idea that your confusion wasn't weakness, but evidence that your soul was resisting domestication. Awakening to the fact that fitting in might have cost you the one thing no one can give back: yourself. Carl Jung once said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But how can you become who you truly are when the entire architecture of your life was designed by the expectations of others? The truth is, normal has always been a moving target, designed not for authenticity, but for conformity. A mirage used to sell you everything from toothpaste to identities. And like all mirages, it disappears the moment you stop running after it. When you stop chasing, something extraordinary happens. You begin listening to the part of you that was buried under performance, to the part of you that once felt wonder when staring at the stars, or felt alive when scribbling poems no one else would ever see. That part never died. It simply went quiet. But now it's whispering again. It's telling you that maybe your life doesn't need to make sense to anyone else. That maybe the questions you've been asking, who am I? Why am I here? What matters, truly, aren't symptoms of brokenness. They are the compass back home. And when you finally stop asking, how can I be normal, and begin asking, what is true? For me, the illusion shatters. You no longer compare your path to the polished reels of others. You no longer mistake chaos for failure. You no longer assume that your pain disqualifies you from joy. You begin to live from the inside out. You become untamed. You choose to build a life not on the blueprints of expectation, but on the architecture of meaning. And meaning doesn't come wrapped in predictability. It comes in risk, in depth, in choosing love over approval, truth over safety, and integrity over image. You won't always be understood. You won't always feel comfortable, but you will feel alive. You will finally taste freedom, not the kind sold in ads, but the kind that comes when your soul is no longer chained to what should be. And maybe, just maybe, you'll look around at this beautiful, complicated, unpredictable life you've crafted and realize there's nothing normal about it, and that's exactly the point.